David Parker.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. You know, one of the sayings you hear when you've been around this place for long enough is that the longer someone is in government, the more out of touch they become. The more they become captured by the interests of their officials and the government departments that start to rule them, rather than the people they're meant to be here to serve. I'm somewhat shocked to hear that this government, who's introduced this piece of legislation to reduce compliance costs by making sure that businesses can use a common number when they're dealing with government, are now saying, oh, but that's actually not what we're going to do with this legislation. Because they're actually now saying that the government departments don't have to do with it. They don't even have a list of the government departments that would be, say, half of the government departments that would be willing to do it, and they're not even willing to give us a time frame within which any percentage of the government has to deal with people through this unique or universal business number. Mr Speaker, this idea that there are going to have to be 150 different computer programs written across government is also a nonsense, but it belies incompetence on the part of the government more generally when it comes to IT projects. Of course there are a variety of IT platforms across government, and the actual interfaces between the new software and those different software systems will have to be a little different. But you know, the government could have already written the overlaying piece of legislation, piece of software, so that they only then had to deal with the interfaces for each department. They haven't learned the lessons of PAYE. How many PAYE systems do you think the government owns across the public sector? An enormous number of them. Do they all work? Well, they don't all work. The government proves that to us every 6 months. We had NovaPay. You'd have thought that after NovaPay, when the super ministry, Moby, we're not allowed to call it Moby, there was a ministerial direction that we weren't allowed to call the Minister of Business, Innovation and Employment, Moby. Moby was formed as the super ministry. Did they check that they had the right PAYE system? Is it the same minister that's responsible for this piece of legislation? No, they didn't check, and that is a consequence. We recently had the embarrassing spectacle that Moby didn't have its own PAYE system right, despite the fact that they house the Department of Labour. They don't even comply with their own law. It is like Faulty Towers. And then we're expected to come along here and trust Minister Joyce to get it right here, despite the fact that by amendment to this legislation, there's no compulsion on the government departments to provide this universal or unique business number. You know, I had said that this ought not to be used for all government departments, and it's true. But I recommend this to the police. You know, we've actually got to the point in New Zealand that with less than 10% of burglaries resolved, the only way the police are going to resolve most burglaries is that the burglars provide their own unique identifier. Mr Speaker, I don't say that seriously, but really the laughability of the government in respect of their opposition to Rhea Bond's very sensible amendment to this legislation proposed by supplementary order paper to put some date by which the government has to do something. Now, maybe the period's wrong. Maybe the government or the minister would like to take a call and say, actually, you know, we can't do it overnight. We can't do it within 2 years, as Dr Clark proposes, but we could do it within 3. I think in the opposition we'd probably agree to 3 years. We wouldn't mind even if we heard from the ministry or the minister and the chair as to when the first government department's going to be using it. It would be quite nice to have a unique government department applying this universal business number. But we haven't even heard the minister giving that. Mr Speaker, Mr Chairman, there are a couple of other issues that I would like to raise quite seriously. One is, I don't think we've had a proper discussion as to why it is that the IRD number that every one of these businesses already has and already knows and already uses every 2 months on their GST return or every year on their income tax return, why that cannot be the unique identifier that government uses. Now, I haven't heard the government explain why that is. There may be some good reasons. But I haven't heard, Mr Chairman, I haven't heard an explanation from either government ministers or in the Select Committee report or from the Minister and the Chair as to why that unique identifier that every business already has is not the unique identifier that's going to be used across government. I heard Brett Hudson say that was impossible. Why? It seems to be possible for the IRD number to have a unique identifier for every New Zealand taxpayer, i.e. every business already. So they seem to be able to work that for every business in New Zealand. Why can't the rest of the government adopt that number? Why can't the government be more sensible in the use of data generally? You know, we've got a problem in New Zealand that some people can't vote at elections. The government doesn't mind that because most of the people that are disenfranchised by that aren't likely to vote for the National Party. So they actually like the rolls to be imperfect. And you actually see this election cycle after election cycle. The Labor Party, when in power, Mr Speaker, this is a matter relating to unique identifiers. The Labor Party makes it easier and easier to enrol for people to get their ability to enrol. And then the National Party comes in and they make it harder every time. And there's a cycle to this. Well, why can't people have a unique identifier like their IRD number that entitles them to vote? That's how some other overseas countries manage their electoral rolls. They base it on their IRD number. They sometimes put a year of birth after it, so it makes it harder for people to defraud voting because they'll turn up and they've got to be about the right age. Mr Speaker, Mr Chairman, why is it that the government won't do these sensible things that would both save money to businesses, save money to the government in the case of the electoral roll, save money to the government in case of using the likes of the IRD number instead of some other new unique identifier when we've already got one for every business in New Zealand? Why is it that they won't do those things? And then more particularly, why is it that the Minister and the Chair of this committee stage of this process won't get up and defend the government in respect of these questions? And the answer is because on these issues they are less than competent. We see it time and time again. We have cost overruns in respect of IT projects. We have delays. The one that we've had that is particularly egregious is we have Parliament twice has had to have amending legislation to extend the date for implementation of a piece of legislation relating to child support payments that twice the government has put deadlines on for implementation, and twice, because of their incompetence in respect of IT projects, they have not met the deadline and they've had to come back to this Parliament and do it again. Now they've become so scared of their own incompetence that they won't agree any timeline, even though they know, as my colleague Jacinda Ardern has pointed out, from their own cabinet papers and their own Treasury reports, that one of the reasons that this will not work as well as it could work is that there is no built-in mechanism from Parliament saying, well, you know, we'll agree a reasonable deadline, but actually we want to have some compulsion for the government to do what it needs to do in terms of their systems to make this unique business number work.
I'm going to